So Cheryl Ramirez, I'm currently the VP of Organizational Development at Dolese Brothers Company, which is a 125-year-old ready mix company here in Oklahoma City. We're all over Oklahoma, now moving into North Texas. I've been here about 6 years, and my whole background has either been, over 47 years, has either been in mining or oil and gas. So I kind of feel full circle being at this organization where I'll close out my career in mining, a mining type environment. How do I define respect? That's a big question, Bobby. I guess for me, I think about it in the way of, let me give an example and then maybe I can define it a little bit better. And I hate to go right directly to politics, but it's the thing I can most relate to this. In the current environment, over the last 2 years, I've really been struggling with people that have a much different point of view than I do politically. But what I found out over just kind of stepping back and looking at that is so many of the people in my life that I love and respect are on the opposite side. And that politics was never something that was there in the way I chose people. So when you ask me about respect, for me, I think it comes down to this place of, can I hear you outside of that or beyond that? And just like you shared with me earlier about being like-hearted, being like-minded, I still struggle with that a bit when I bring respect into that. But for me, it's like, can I hear you? Can I see you for who you are? Can I set aside some of my biases? And then can I be willing to stand in this conversation with you, no matter what it is, and us just learn from each other? So respect for me has probably moved over the course of my lifetime from, just being nice and kind to people and polite to more about, if I'm drawn towards you enough to have a conversation, what can I continue to learn about you that has me stay engaged in this relationship? I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes perfect sense. Thank you. And if I may just recap, right? Thank you for going to the environment we're in. And I would say for those watching, I believe, the tensions we're facing in separation in the US we're not alone. It's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing in the way you're defining it is that it takes courage, because often like corporate values, right? There's a whole spectrum from companies that do the work at the top senior leadership level, throw up posters and talk about it at all hands, but then day to day, not happening. We know that, right? So it's rare. And in fact, it's a real lovely telltale sign when you don't see the posters on the wall, but you see it practiced. Right. So I think respect is in one of those. Like, I would hope just about every company would say that it should be a company value. And the way you're defining it, the way I heard you define it is, I don't have to agree or disagree with your perspective, but can I take the time and give the spaciousness? Because we're so busy and we move so fast that what I hear time and time again is, I don't want to go there. Right. And so instead we put it under the rug, and that festers into passive aggressiveness, into wasted productivity and time. The implications, and what intrigues me about this topic in a workplace context is that the cost of ignoring a lack of respect is huge, right? And also, to just clarify, and I'd love your perspective on this, there are a couple of intersecting pieces to respect. So we know trust, of course, right? And thank you, Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Big fan of that and the assessment. But what I had the realization about is, I can't even start to trust you, Cheryl, if I don't know you, until I can respect your humanity.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to that example. Like, I think you brought it up, but to me, one of the things that always jumps out to me is sitting on an airplane, right? I fly a lot. And you're sitting next to someone, and my first instinct is put on the headphones and not engage. Some little Jiminy Cricket in me says, oh, come on, Bobby, like, at least during takeoff, let's get to know the person. Every single time I end up with seeing difference, right? Very different perspectives,
Right.
but my judgments, my radar, all of that comes down.
Yes.
I create that space in that, I'll call it seminal space up at 30,000 feet to just listen, right? And laugh. Exactly. Yeah. And let me turn it back to you, because the other thing that strikes me is, fortunately, I've never been in the situation where we think we're going to crash and die. But imagine if we took that approach of, I would hope anybody watching would say that if we were about to crash, I would hold your hand regardless of how we view each other and say blessings, be well. Hope, what are you grateful for in your life? Let's share that as we're going down, not how many cars do I have and, the salary I made or the titles I had. I think it just comes down to one fundamental thing we're losing, which is love for each other. And so respect only comes when, and love doesn't mean romantic, of course. I mean,
Right.
it can be, but, just loving someone's humanity. So
I love that you've gone this route. And when you go back to your initial, when you first started sharing a minute ago about the workplace and the posters. So I worked for an organization where they formed this big D&I group when I was there, right? And I was a part of it. I left that company 15 years ago, maybe a little bit less, but it's been in the last 10 to 15 years. They are still trying to get that right? Still, I'm hearing the same issues. The organization I'm currently in, it was one of the things I noticed when I first joined the executive team was we didn't talk about DEI. And that was initially a little bit off-putting for me. I wasn't sure. I mean, I knew I had been brought in, but there really wasn't this conversation. And as I got to know people, and I report directly to the CEO, so I was able to have those conversations. What I've come to appreciate now, being here for 6 years, is we are practicing it, like you said, walking the talk. We're not talking about it every day. We're talking about people and their skills and abilities, right? We're talking about people's behaviors, not in a context of DEI. And I have really grown to appreciate that because it's caused me to also step back and look at, I believe there are plenty of people in this organization who may not like me, but I believe I could ask anyone for help and I would get it. And that was not an experience I necessarily have felt in other environments where so much of this was the bigger conversation. Um, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be that conversation at all. I'm just saying we're not missing it because we're not posting about it. We're actually doing it.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think it gets to what you absolutely said, that love for humanity.
I love it, Cheryl. Thank you. So that's the second one, mic drop right there. You've gone to the next big, from political environment to DE&I. And I want to talk to the audience, by the way. I didn't prep her. We didn't do any prep for this. We're just having a conversation. So it's great that you did that. So here's my take on that is I've said it for a couple of years. I've given keynotes on this subject, especially in very conservative environments where, I was teed up by the people who brought me in for opening keynotes to say, hey, the audience is going to be pretty conservative. I said, that's fine, all good.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether it's conservative or not, what I've said for a while is exactly that don't do DE&I as a check the box and posting online and talking about it, walk the talk.
Yeah.
And I believe that's still happening. So despite the fact that all the public impression of and fear around things getting shut down, I'm still, in my experience with the companies I work with, still fully committed. It's not about, in fact, they don't like calling any of that stuff, the whole wordplay stuff around, oh, no, it's actually belonging. No, it's inclusion. Just put that all aside.
Right.
Are you doing the right thing to bring in the best talent? Are you considering equity where you have to recognize that you've got to do that differently?
Right.
Because the power differential, the background, and I'm actually let's go here with respect. And if you're willing, let's intersect this with AI, because there isn't a conversation we can have these days without AI. So I'm curious to hear your perspective. Yeah, let's just start broadly first.
Yeah.
What's your landscape view on AI, and especially around values and culture and company, right? And
this is fascinating because I would say that I am very junior at this, um, And I'm moving more towards favoring AI for two reasons. One, I think it is not going to replace all the people we think it is, because if it does, you guys haven't been reading what AI sometimes produces. There has to be a human interaction. Will it change some jobs? Yes, but I don't know that it's all going to be negative. And I'm seeing that occur here in this 125-year-old company where people are afraid of that. And watching how people are interacting with some of it. In terms of values and respect, I think what's interesting is it can help us shape a way to language some things when we're not sure. Now, I haven't really tried it. I mean, full disclosure, with that particular intention in mind, but I'm using it now. I have these things I call coaching circles where I bring 4 to 5 people from across the organization. We have an agenda and they're in a particular program. And I'm starting to use AI with my materials to say, help me think of some more reflective questions. And I've been very impressed with some of the dialogue I can get by the way AI frames the question versus me. Now, sometimes I have to come in behind that, but everything we're doing in our coaching circle around human behavior is about values and respect. And I was very surprised, and I'm going to say I've just done it this month was the first time I actually tried that with my questions, because I've always had great success with the way I can frame a question and get people to share. I'm getting such a richer context and people going a little bit deeper about what's personal to them. And the values that are getting shared across these coaching circles are invaluable to us as an organization as people start to connect that way.
Wow, it really warms my heart. Congrats. And they're lucky to have you guide them that way. With me, I have been fearful, like many, about it. And then I've applied a couple of things that I'm curious to hear your thought. I looked at it and went, okay, I gotta get curious, right? Because I'm in a generation that is, beyond, but I have teenagers and, young adults. So I'm looking at what's the world going to look like for them and what's career and what are the jobs, because we keep hearing the jobs of 3-5 years from now aren't even in our remotest consideration right now. But what's fascinated me, by the way, just last night, I highly recommend this as a quick side note. I watched The Thinking Mind. Where did you see it? If you've seen it, right, about deep mind. And I first was like, it's Wednesday night and documentary. Like, really, do I want to do it? But here's the spoiler alert for those watching. The thing that really struck me that ties to this conversation, Mark, respect. One, my heart just opened so wide when I got the point about, the founder of DeepMind and his commitment to doing good for humanity, and his decision to open, the doors on more scientists exploring. So let's connect that with where we started around the political environment. What my hope is for every single human being is for us to remember 2 things. One, we all have agency. We get to choose whether we're going to be an Oppenheimer in that story, right? And think about the implications of what they invented and created as for good or for not good. Do I have the agency to discern? That's the second thing, is discernment around, is this good for me and is it good for the world, right? I mean, look at climate change, I call it ignorance, right? Or denial. Because, look at Florida price, real estate, it's coming down because it's impacted by that. So you can't put a happy face or look the other way when that's happening. And I'm not getting into the how we do it, but back to that story with DeepMind, what struck me was it takes courage.
Yes.
Just coming back to your company, I would say that, we know that culture, regardless of whether as professionals we think of it as by design or not, every organization, even a small team, has a culture.
Absolutely.
And so my intersection on this with the topic of respect is, like, I love the coaching groups you're talking about. Do you create that safe space? And I'm not using that as just the label for DE9, but truly safe space for people to ask those powerful questions that evoke ways of thinking. And lastly, what I'll say is I'm blown away, even with standard assessments like 5 dysfunctions of a team. I've literally walked into a client to run an offsite with them and having dinner with them the night before. And the president of the company says to me, just you're sending that as pre-work and those questions had them talking deeper.
That's right.
These are friends. They've known each other, but the reason I was brought in is there wasn't trust.
Right.
They weren't having the conversations they need to have.
Well, Bobby,
Surface level, respect. Yeah, please.
yeah, no, I've been reminded that throughout this whole conversation about this one exercise that was done to me years ago, that I've used quite often, and it is so powerful. It's very simple, but so powerful. And that is, you put two people together, and if it's a team, you pair them up. And maybe you know a little bit about them ahead of time where you pair them, in a special way to make sure these two people are going to talk. And all you say to people is, what has the last 10 years been like? There's no other instruction. And they'll ask, is this about work? Is this person? You say, what has the last 10 years been like? And you send them to have this dialogue for 20 minutes. Now, there's a speaker A and a speaker B. And speaker A is talking, and they get 10, 15 minutes, whatever the facilitator gives them. And the other speaker, B, is just listening. No questions. You can't add anything. You're just listening. And what I have found is that simple exercise has moved people from, I can't talk to Bobby, I don't even care about Bobby, to, I may not like him, but we can probably work together. Because if
I
you
love that.
don't give them anything else and leave it for them to just share what they're willing to, people quite often will go deeper than they even think they will.
Well, and I love the elegance. It's such a simple but powerful question because there's no loaded agenda.
Right.
I love that piece.
Yeah.
And the freedom to go with it where they want.
Right. And then when you bring them back together, you're not looking for them to share into the room anything about what the other person said. What did you take away from that experience? What was it like to be heard?
There
And
it is.
freedom, right?
Yep. Agency. It's their choice. Yep. To recap what they took away. Sorry if you can hear my dog. So Cheryl, we're going to wrap up here in a minute. Parting words for folks listening. If you were actually do share, if you're willing, the certification you just had and how that ties with this topic. And if there's one wish, request, action you'd like the world listeners, to take. If you want to tie those things, it's up to you. But yeah, just those two things. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Bobby. So one of my favorite quotes is Joseph Campbell's, "You must be willing to let go of the life you've planned so as to be ready for the life that awaits you." And that pulled me out of a deep, dark depression in 97 when I lost my almost 15-year-old daughter to a very short illness. And I knew ever since then I wanted to do some kind of work when I retire around hospice. And so the certification you're referring to is the recent certificate of completion at the University of Vermont as a death doula. And most people know about birth doulas, but the death doula is really there to support you emotionally, spiritually, in a framework of psychologically, but not as a psychologist. It's really that emotional, spiritual aspect. And I, over the years since losing my daughter, have been asked to support people at the end of life and have found that it's just a gift I can bring. And this just kind of validated that. And it's another way for me, if I put it in the sense of respect, to continue to practice what I preach and to continue to support people that I may have nothing else in common with other than we're a human being. And if I can bring some kind of space for them to have the completion conversations or what they need to move on to whatever's next for themselves and their family, that's where I think I'm best meant to spend the rest of my life. And I believe when I do that, this is my purpose. It really feels, Bobby, like my purpose.
Oh yeah, I can feel it. I mean, my gosh. Yeah, I'm holding back the tears, but actually tears of joy. Cheryl, thank you for having that insight, connecting your grief over your daughter towards a purpose. Yeah,
and thank you so much for this. I've enjoyed meeting you, Bobby. So the audience knows, I did not have any idea what to expect. So
yeah. No, thank you very much. And anything you'd like the audience to take away as your wish for the world, because we started from that place of separation.
Yeah. For me, it would be, can we just find the time just to listen to each other? Just take a moment to say hello and listen for a minute.
Yeah.
I know it sounds cliche and,
No, it's not. And
but it's hard.
yeah, and in this Twitter kind of world of like, how are you doing? No, most people don't expect you to actually answer that.
Yeah.
It's usually
And
just a surface level, like I'm fine.
yes, and let me just say something. I just said that's hard. And I had a gentleman in class the other day who said, change is hard, but I'm shifting it in my mind to change is challenging. And I think that's the gift. Just view it as challenging and you can get through it.
Absolutely. And I'm a big, as much as it's challenging, I'm still an eternal optimist.
Yeah.
And so from that place of seeing the challenge as I can do this and to step forth and have the courage to have those conversations.
Right. Bobby, have a blessed day.